All right. Welcome everyone and welcome to the second WEkEO Hackathon webinar. Today, our main topic is going to be ideation and development, and we have a lineup of amazing guests that will guide you not only through the WEkEO, but also through a success story. Here's an overview of today's agenda. So we will start with a quick recap and the introduction to what happened last webinar, sorry. Then we will go to introduction of the WEkEO computational resources and tools. We have insights from a previous WEkEO winner, and then we will move on to the ideation and project development, some tips and insights and frameworks that you can use to come up with an idea to submit for your hackathon application. We will have the closing remarks and also the next steps. Each segment has a specific Q&A time, so you don't need to wait all the way to the end to ask your questions, but after each part, you will have a time to ask questions to our speakers. All right, about our first session, here are some highlights. And in the first session, we basically introduced the WEkEO's capabilities for tackling climate issues with the Earth observation data. We also walked through the platform tools and discussed how to start forming teams and collaborating on Slack. If you miss it, no worries, you can watch the recording on the UltraHack website. And if you are already on our Slack, you can find under the resource tab. Today, we will move from learning about the tools to actually generating ideas. We will go through ideation techniques and kickstart the creative process to help you address real-world climate problems. I am happy to introduce Anna-Lena that will be here with us to share some insights on how to use these resources and empower your project. And Anna-Lena will also be available for a Q&A in the end, so you can ask questions. So have your questions ready and enjoy this part of the session. Anna-Lena, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm happy to be here and to introduce some further WEkEO tools to you, tools and services. My name is Annalena. I work for EUMETSAT as a Copernicus Data Services Engineer, and I have been now working on WEkEO for more than 1 year. And yeah, happy to be here. So let's start. Well, if I can change the slides. Yeah. So in the last webinar, I believe that you've already learned a bit about WEkEO. WEkEO practically is a Copernicus data and information access system. So you can access all the Copernicus data through this one platform. We have a different range of services from data discovery to data access to data processing services. Last webinar, I believe you have heard a lot about the data discovery, so the viewer, how to search for data, what data is there, etc. So today we will focus, or I will focus with my presentation on the data access and the data processing. So some tools which WEkEO offers that you can really use during the hackathon to bring your project to the next steps to really do some data analysis. As I mentioned, through WEkEO, you can have all the Copernicus data available through one interface. That interface is usually the WEkEO Harmonized Data Access API. So it's a simple API, and it's the entry point for programmatic data access. To get the data, you can either go through the viewer, which is also connected to the API, and then click to whatever product you want to search and download it through the viewer. But if you want to have lots of data, it might become a bit exhausting to do all manual. So then you can use either the Python client or the R client to access your data. To make it even more accessible, to make data even more accessible to you and easier to handle, we also have plugins for Climate Lab. So this is practically a streamlined data access, which uses the API, but makes lots of the things which are maybe a bit like harder to handle, such as different like file formats or like different files in which you have to manage in your working directory. The Climate Lab tool really like eases that burden. We have some plugins for the WEkEO data, so you're very welcome to check it out. I have now added here some of the links to the description of those data access services, so you can just have a look, assess what the services can do for you and which of those three is best for your hackathon project. Now coming to the data processing. Well, we all probably know that Earth observation data can be really big. It can go up to several gigabytes, sometimes even terabytes, depending on how much data you want to process. So at least I have faced in the past very often the challenge that, okay, the resources I have on my local computer are simply not enough. Okay, so it's sometimes really hard to just free up several gigabytes to work on this raw data sets. This is why WEkEO also offers two kinds of services to you, which makes the data processing part independent on what resources you have available on your own local machine. That is one, the WEkEO workspace, and two, WEkEO virtual machines. So the WEkEO workspace is a Jupyter Hub environment with up to 12 gigabyte of RAM, 6 CPUs, and 20 gigabytes of storage. If you've seen or if you've worked with Jupyter notebooks in the past, you're probably a bit familiar with this environment. So it's a Jupyter lab. I will show you some pictures of this in the following slides. The second one are the WEkEO virtual machines. So with this, you really get a virtual machine which is running somewhere in the cloud. That is practically a completely like empty computer, like with only some like operational system like Ubuntu and some pre-installed software. And we can provide you as hackathon teams of the WEkEO hackathon with some WEkEO virtual machines. More details on that will also come in a few minutes. So first, on the WEkEO workspace. So it's a web-based interactive development environment for Jupyter notebooks, code, visualization, and data. So you practically have everything which you need for like a really quick prototyping already in there. You have two different server options, the Earth observation tools and machine learning, which have a different set of pre-installed Python packages, for example, or pre-installed software on that workspace. What is really important, the WEkEO workspace is available and free for anyone at any time. So this is not connected somehow to the hackathon. You can just go there right now. You can register, you can click on that little button, and then you will already have access to the WEkEO workspace. So you can also get like familiar with the service before the hackathon, if you like. And here on the right image, you see how it looks like. It's a usual Jupyter Hub environment. It looks like it, but it's even more than only a Jupyter Hub environment. You have resources available that can get you started on the processing of Earth observation data, like especially if you're maybe, okay, you're really used to coding, but you're new to Earth observation and satellite data. You can go to the public folder, and then you can just see a nice overview, like different repositories where you have Jupyter notebooks available that, for example, explain how you access a certain kind of satellite data from WEkEO. So these are all really nice examples that can get you started on your hackathon project. Then I said it looks like a Jupyter Hub environment, but it's even more. It also has some more software on it. So for example, if you prefer to code in R with the language R, then we have RStudio also on top of the Jupyter Hub environment. So you can just go to the Earth observation tools in the server options, and then you will see a button. I'll quickly go back. Here, you can see the button. I don't know if I have a pointer somewhere. Okay, I will. Here you have a button with RStudio, and there you can launch R. And okay, now the slide is empty again. Okay, then one other tool, which is really nice. It's one of my most favorite tools on WEkEO. It's actually a general tool. It's called Xcube Viewer, and it was developed by another company called Brockman Consult. And we have implemented this to be used inside the WEkEO workspace as well. And it's just amazing to visualize, interact, and share your results within a Jupyter notebook. So if you have, like, for example, a time series of data in an X array or in a bucket, in an S3 bucket somewhere, you can connect this software, Xcube Viewer, inside a notebook to it. And then you have like a really nice graphical user interface where you can visualize time series, where you can just explore the data, make a video out of the time steps, etc. Here on the right, you can see that there are also example notebooks within the WEkEO for Data repository. So you are very welcome to just have a look and see maybe it's how it can be useful for your hackathon project. It's really great to visualize and interact with data. That's all for the WEkEO workspace. I will now move on to the WEkEO virtual machines. So the WEkEO virtual machine, it's a cloud-based computational environment provided by WEkEO. Actually, we will provide you with a tenant, and within the tenant, you can create virtual machines, you can create S3 buckets, and so on. That means for projects which kind of exceed the resources available in the Jupyter Hub, maybe you remember it's like only 20 gigabytes of storage in the Jupyter Hub. So if you have projects or if you need data that exceeds those 20 gigabytes, the option of the WEkEO virtual machine might be the right for you and your hackathon project. So you can process and analyze data on the same environment. It's practically like a local machine, but well, it's in the cloud, so you only need an internet connection to connect to it. And yeah, it's great for like extended prototyping where the provisioning or whether the volume exceeds the provisioning of the Jupyter Hub. How you can access the virtual machines. In general, once your account is allocated to one tenant, so a virtual machine, you can just log in, and then here right next to the Jupyter Hub or the WEkEO workspace icon, you can access the virtual machines. What's in it for you? So the WEkEO Hackathon participants, as a participant, you can get a virtual machine for free. It's usually a paid offer or an offer of the Copernicus Innovation Lab, but as a participant of the hackathon, you will just be provisioned with one tenant for the duration of the hackathon. It will have 2 CPUs, 16 gigabytes of RAM, block storage, object storage, and a public IP. And yeah, it will practically look like this photo here in the middle. It's just a terminal. It's a Linux machine, and then you can install all the software you need. You can decide on a predefined image like OSGeo, where you already have like some software installed, and then you can just start analyzing as you would with your local computer. So how do you actually get a virtual machine that you can just click on that button when you're logged into WEkEO? So for the hackathon, it will work like this, that the team leader of each team can sign up for a tenant after the confirmation of participation. So that will be after the 1st of December, after like the sign up closes, you will get a confirmation of participation, and then the form to sign up for a tenant will be shared with you by the organizers. The team leader afterwards gets a tenant assigned before the start of the hackathon, so somewhere in between the 2nd and the 11th or 12th. Here, my team at UMatsat, we will just assign a tenant to you. Then the team leader can invite the team members to the tenant. So then afterwards, you can all work on the tenant together. You can then create VMs, buckets, and so on, whatever you need for the hackathon project. And yeah, this is practically how it looks like. This is how the inside of such a tenant looks like. You will see how many resources you have. So you will here have a lower number of instances that I have. You will have 2 CPUs. So what I just showed you earlier, this will be the limits of what you can use. Here at the instances, yeah, you can then create those virtual machines. If you want to create an S3 bucket where you can just shove all your data in and maybe like stream your data out to a Jupyter Notebook, you can do this here. And yeah, this is practically all you need to know. There is a comprehensive overview on what you can do here under this link. It's a really good documentation so that you will be able to do everything you need for your hackathon project. And of course, there will be always somebody there to answer your questions if you have any. All right, exactly. This is a link to the help desk articles of WEkEO, where also the first steps of creating a tenant and how to access it and what tenants are available is described. And there you can also find again the link to the extensive documentation on the WEkEO tenants. Then I've shared like many links in my presentations, which point to pages of the help center of the user support. And yeah, actually the team of the user support will be there for you before the hackathon, during the hackathon, for all the questions you have. There are different ways of contacting them. Or well, taking the offer of the user support. First is the help center, where you can find all those articles I linked to. Then if that doesn't answer your question, you can chat with them. Here you also can find this chat window everywhere on the WEkEO homepage once you're logged in. There is also a contact us form, which you can see here. And you can also write an email to support@wekeo.eu. It's a great team, and they're really responsive and will be able to answer all your questions. So I really encourage you to make use of the offer of the user support anytime you have a question. Then 2 more points. One is on the Copernicus Innovation Lab. I already mentioned earlier in my presentation that the tenants are provided under the Copernicus Innovation Lab for the duration of the hackathon, just the cloud computing resources. And the Copernicus Innovation Lab is actually a project that exists also beyond this hackathon. So winning projects become part of the Innovation Lab and get the provisioning of computational resources for their projects. And projects of Copernicus users from the Copernicus member states can apply for the Copernicus Innovation Lab. So when after the hackathon, okay, maybe you were not the winning team, but you still want to continue, you are free to go through the usual application process of the Copernicus Innovation Lab and then apply for those computational resources. And finally, I've talked a lot about now all the different services and tools. If you want to get some hands-on experience with those tools and services before the hackathon to be like really well equipped with the WEkEO toolbox, this is an invitation to come to the upcoming training session on coastal interactions. It will happen on the 4th and 6th December. And there will be lots of really interesting presentations, use cases, and also a practical session on the second day, where you will get lots of input and practical experiences on use cases. That's all from me. No, not yet. Sorry. That's actually the most important slide, the last one, to sum it all up, right? So the timeline, what you as hackathon participants need to know. So right now you can still sign up for the hackathon. Then starting from the 2nd of December, you can, okay, I will take 2nd of December, you can sign up for a tenant. The form will be shared with you. Then you just need to wait until this tenant gets assigned to you. You can invite your team members. You can set up the tenant, ask your questions. Then don't forget the training, which you can attend. And at any time, use the WEkEO API for data access and the WEkEO Jupyter Hub for data processing. So it's open for everyone. You can try it out at any time. And then what's left for me to say is wish you a happy hacking using the WEkEO virtual machines, the workspace, the API, and all the other services. And after the hackathon, if you want to continue your project, you can apply to the Copernicus Innovation Lab. Now it's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annalena. And now let's open right away the stage for questions from our participants. Does anyone has any questions? You can either post in the chat or just open your mic and ask straight. But while people are still thinking about the questions, I want to ask right away, how early should I get familiar with all the WEkEO resources and what is your recommendation?
I would say as early as possible, of course. I mean, most of the resources are just open anytime for anyone. So my first steps would be, okay, go to the notebooks, take a look at the notebooks, what interests you, then try it out on the WEkEO workspace, maybe find the data in the WEkEO viewer, download the data, and then your first usage of tools is accomplished already.
Thank you, thank you. All right, what about our participants? Any questions for now? And of course, if you don't have any questions now, but then the questions come up later, you can contact us through Slack, as some of you already did, or then you can also contact us by email. No questions so far. All right. All right. Thank you so much, Annalena, for the presentation and the further dive into the WEkEO resources and support as well. It is great to have you here, and participants feel always free to ask questions when you have.
Please do.
Let's now move on to the insights from a previous WEkEO winner. We have Alessandra with us that will guide us through this part. Alessandra, are you here with us?
Yes, I am.
Yes. All right, the stage is yours then.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction. So my name is Alessandra. As a background, I'm a marine biologist and data scientist. And I'm going to walk you through the problem that we identified before the hackathon started and how we approached it during the hackathon and what happened after the hackathon, because this project is still ongoing. Okay, so our project is called Galene Pathways, and basically we use the satellite data and machine learning for environmental monitoring. So the first challenge that we identified is, as everyone might know, is all the threats on the ocean ecosystems. So if you think about the fishing, if you think about the coastal development, if you think about the climate change, these are all threats that continuously impact on different fronts of the marine ecosystems. And they are threats that are still ongoing, and therefore they are escalating. And an urgent action is needed since our ecosystem are not faring so well at the moment. On the other hand, however, marine conservation do have some gaps. So if you see the numbers, the SDG 14, which is the one that is supposed to protect the oceans and the life underwater, is the one that received the least funding. So only 1% of the total impact investment is devoted to this objective. And on the other hand, MPAs, although they are growing in number, not all of them are effective. So the 27% of them are what is called a paper park. So it's a park on paper, but it's not providing any effective protection if we look at the impact that it has had on the long term. So it's done only to achieve the percentage of protected areas, but in concrete, it does not offer any protection at all. And on the other hand, we have a lot of stakeholders that have all sort of different interest in the marine ecosystems. So if you think about the government, NGOs, the scientific institution, and local communities, they all act within the same scope and the same environment. But everyone has a different set of objectives, and not always this set of objectives agree with one another. So this can lead to duplicated efforts, but also initiatives that pulls in different directions, which at the end of the day end up in missed synergies, which do not have any concrete or positive effect. We also have another challenge, which is in the data themselves. So if you think about the ocean, is very wide and very much unknown. So if you think about very isolated areas or hard to reach because of weather conditions, because of ice, because it's really deep, we do have a lot of data gaps into the ocean, which is both spatial and temporal. It's also costly to gather this data, and most of the time it's a very slow process because the techniques themselves are really hard or require a lot of more background thought if we compare that on land. So this leads basically to a lack of standardization and the uniformity of data, again, both in terms of time and spatial scale. And this also has a whole different lot of consequences, which is, again, we can miss early warnings. For example, if we have some coral bleaching in remote areas when no one is looking at, or other environmental events that are happening in real time, we are not equipped to find them and to mark them almost in real time. And also is leading a problem to the policy environment. So for the policies, there are a lot of indicators that are coming out in the last years, and they do require a lot of data to see if one environment, one state is compliant with these indexes or not. If we don't have the data, we cannot evaluate the policies and see if they're effective or if they've been respected. Why will this matter? So why should we be interested in the data in the marine ecosystem? If you think about the blue economy, which is everything ocean related, I mean the fisheries, the tourism, the shipping, the renewable energy, etc., is worth between 2.5 and 1.5 trillion USD dollars annually. So it's not something to be underestimated. And beside our well-being, our economies also depend on a healthy ocean. So we decided to tackle all these sorts of problems, because we also thought if we tackle one, it would be also easier to tackle the other ones. So our objective is to understand, is to improve the understanding, the management and observation of marine ecosystem for a sustainably blue economy on the long term. So our objective as we approached the hackathon was to improve the compliance with environmental regulation, but support also policies and decision-making based on the data. Also is the cross-border collaboration, and therefore helps the standardization of the data and also bridge the gaps between this data gathering. So this was the first prototype of the project, which we also presented at the hackathon, which was done by Tobias, which was a colleague and now friend that we've met during the hackathon and that joined our team. So what came into being within this project? So we coupled the different data sources, the satellite data, maritime mapping, and real-time activity tracking. In the first case, the satellite data were the input for a machine learning model, which is going to forecast 1 year in advance for marine variables, and therefore give us a snapshot of how the variables are going to change into the future. All these three items converge into the impact assessment of a specific ecosystem, and this in turn guides the decisions for policymakers. So this is the sort of like logic points that we were following during the hackathon. So as for the data, we use a different data sources, which helps us to cover both in time and space as much part of the ocean as we could. And this also meant implementing different data sources for different kind of data. So we have the data set for temperature, biogeochemistry, and salinity. And we took basically the data from the beginning of the 1990s up to 2023. All these data are really important for us because they provided us with the spatial coverage, also a long-term data, and a high resolution. These are three important parameters which are basically very important and represent the basis for the machine learning model. Because as we say, for machine learning, trash in and trash out. So you have to have really good data for a machine learning model to do its job and to do it well. On top of this, we also use as a complementary data, which included, for example, incident measurement, historical records, and also some weather data. So what happens with the data? We acquire the data and pre-process them. We also made a temporal and spatial aggregation because also sometimes there was some mismatch between the spatial resolution between the different data. We then created the time series. We built a model, and then we corrected and validated the model with continuously with the data. We produced a forecast, and then we integrated the other additional data. And all this process fed at the end into the spatial analysis module, let's say. So this is what came out from the machine learning model for the environmental forecasting. So in this case, you can see the area in Portugal around Lisbon. So Lisbon should be, I don't have a pointer, but what is basically that bay, which is the mouth of the river Tagus. And on your left, you can see what our model forecasted, and on the right, the actual measurement from the satellite. This is entire year 2023, and in this case, we're looking at the sea surface temperature. As you can see, the model is doing a really good job at predicting the pattern of the temperature, but it's failing a little bit more when we have outliers. So the very hot point very cool points. But this is to be expected for any machine learning model, which they generally do well with data within an established interval, and they lose accuracy with outliers. This is another example. Again, on the left, there's the forecast of our model, and on the right, what is predicted from the satellites for the entire 2023. And again, we're looking at pH at this time, and is the area around Azores Island. Again, we can see that it's doing a really good job, even better in this case, because we have less outliers in predicting how the pH is going to shift across every month. All these measurements and model do refer on the surface level, but since the satellite do have the measurement at different depth, we can do the same simulations at different levels. Okay, so what comes out of this map? So after we did the forecast and we added all the real-time activities and other maps, for example, the ecosystem mapping, fishing activities, marine protected areas, what we can pull out of this analysis. In first case, it's just a visualization matter. So to see all these items in a map at the same time, which is not as complicated as it can be. So our aim was also to lower down the complexity in order to make the snapshot of the ecosystem clear. On the second hand, we have decision support on tools, which can be an impact assessment, can also include ecosystem services evaluation. So how much an ecosystem is worth in terms of money. So in terms of water security, cost of security, jobs, health benefits, and so on, and how these values are going to change into the future if the ecosystem is degraded. And last, we also have reports, which can range from some documents for the general public or scientific documents for, I don't know, scientific and research organizations and so on. But also we do have a policy report which states how the ecosystem, if the ecosystem is in line with the indicators specified by the policies. So what are the applications? Again, it's just a matter in the first place of mapping all these things in the same place to do some environmental forecasting, which is a fundamental right now with climate change. Also to track all the activities that are happening in the marine space at the same time, and therefore add all this up to see how the ecosystem is servicing us in terms of money, in terms of benefit. So here we have two case studies. In the first one, which is the one that you see in the slide, is the case of algal blooms. So algal blooms are very toxic, and they can influence some policy response. So the algal blooms happens if certain conditions are respected in terms of, for example, of temperature and organic matter in the water. So if we forecast what these conditions are suitable of an algal bloom, we can also have an early warning for it. And therefore, we can have proactive policies which can reduce, for example, the losses in tourism and fishing by isolating that area before the damage happens. And this in turn gives us less economic losses. So in the map, you can see the plot of the temperature with the orangish yellow dots, and in blue, the nitrate concentration. And in the graph, there's an average of the entire area in the map for the nitrate in blue and the phosphate in orange. So as we're tracking, for example, the nitrate and the phosphate and the temperature, we can also see if these are in track with the regulation. If you think about to the European Marine Strategy framework directive, it has some thresholds for elements like the nitrate, the phosphate, and pH, for example. So as we track them for the algal blooms, we can see how they relate with these policies. And here we have these gauges for every one of this item, and we can see in green if it's in line, if in orange if it's like a borderline element, and in red if it's above the level that is permitted by the policies. We can sum all these indicators and see if in Portugal, for example, and in Europe, if every single one of these is in line or off track with a specific policy. We also have another example. In this case, is about the fisheries and compliance in MPAs. So when MPAs or marine protected areas are isolated, it's very hard to monitor them and to enforce what kind of regulation are in place in the marine protected areas. However, his satellite, we can also track fishing activities, which you can see in this map. And there's a heat map from green to red based on the amount of fishing hours along lines around the Azores. This data comes from the Global Fishing Watch, which is again a free and an open data set for everything fishing activities. In white, we have the marine protected areas that are implemented in the Azores. And if you go on the dashboard, which I have the link at the end, and you hover on top of the maps, you can see what kind of regulations are in place in these marine protected areas. And in this case, the information comes from the Protected Planet website. So if we overlap this kind of data, we can see where the fishing activities are happening and where they were not supposed to happen. At the same time, if we monitor the environmental variables, for example, in this case, we have the net primary productivities, the phytoplankton and chlorophyll, which are indicative for where the fishes can be. We can also try to understand what the fishes are going to be, and therefore where the fishing activities can happen, which also means try to localize in advance illegal fishing activities, because illegal fishing activities are also where fishes are, and therefore increase the monitoring activities in these specific areas. As before, as we track this item, we can see the compliance with policies. In these cases, we have the quotas for each species of fish. Again, we have seen these gauges where we have the red, the species where the catches are in line with the quotas, and orange where we are like very close on the limit, and the red, the one that are on top of the quotas. At the same time, since we are monitoring marine protected areas and illegal activities, we can have a sort of log of all the accidents that have been reported within the maritime space, which can include prohibited gear, prohibited species that have been landed or recorded, the trespassing intramarine protected areas that is closed, and etc. And we can also see which species is involved in this accident and how this conservation status of the species is according with the UCN. So again, we have a screenshot of what is happening in the area on multiple indices that are correlated with one another. So of course, everything has limitation, and on our hand, we found two different kinds of limitation. On one hand, it is technical, because the data themselves, even if they come from satellites, from local sources or real time, they always have some kind of limitation. In the terms of the satellites, they are not limited. We have limited data in the past. So when we go past, for example, a few decades, we have to rely on other kind of data, which might lead to integration problems. Also, the satellite can have the highest resolution, around 4 or 5 kilometers, which is good for most applications. But if we look at some marine protected areas, for example, they are really, really tiny. And therefore, the data might not be the best match for this very tiny area of interest. On the other hand, we have the human component. So many people don't know that the satellite data are out there, and it's not a data source that they are familiar with. So in the first instance, there's also this kind of conversation that must go on the background, where you have to make the stakeholders trust this kind of data. Especially institutions or local communities are very set in their ways, and they're very reluctant sometimes to change their way of working. So a lot of effort, in my opinion, needs to go in this kind of relationship, because it's important and it's key to actually have something that works and that everyone embraces. So as for the future, of course, the satellite data are limited to a single region, which means that this project and this approach can be expanded at different ecosystems. It can be also applied at different policies. If you think about plastic, if you think about illegal fishing, and therefore everything that happens in the maritime space and everything sort of that can be tracked. So how did we basically get to this point? So we base ourselves on three main key decisions. So we wanted to process the satellite data in an effective manner, to have an effective environmental forecasting, and therefore an impact assessment that would make sense and that would be realistic. On the other hand, we have to match this with the technicalities. And therefore, we had to build a pipeline which was made up of modules, which was scalable, and it was also reliable enough to integrate and not crash with all these kind of data sources. So about the innovative part, we have to come up with different ways to integrate this data, twitch a little bit the machine learning architecture to match this kind of data, and then to reinterpret of this with the indexes and the metrics that we had in the policy that we had identified in the policy sector. Of course, 90% of what I'm describing, this came after the hackathon. So therefore screenshot, and therefore the environmental monitoring and the overlap with some environmental data was what we actually produced during the 2 days of the hackathon. Which leads me to my suggestions for the hackathon itself. So choose a language and stick with it. So you've seen before that you have Python, that you have R. Just choose whatever suits your objective best and stick with it. Don't change it midway, because that can lead to a lot of issues. Start with a pipeline first. So if you have a starting point and what you want to achieve, how do you want to get there from a technical perspective? So what are the machine learning, the data processing, and everything, all the functions that you might need to go from A and to B? And therefore, all the steps and how to make them bigger. Because as it was said before, the satellite data can be a lot, and they will probably be a lot. So you need to have something that works fast and it works well, and it can accommodate gigabyte of data. And which also means that something can be run again and again and again, because the satellite data do come with always updates, and you might need in the future to kind of reuse the same architecture to integrate new data, to update the output or whatever. For the machine learning part itself, or for the data processing part itself, keep in mind that data cleaning and data pre-processing takes a lot of time. In my experience, probably 60%, 70% of the hackathon time will go into data processing, at least from the people that will deal with this kind of task. So set time aside for that, because having the data of high quality, it basically means to have a high quality product. Yeah, like you cannot underestimate or kind of set for later the cleaning of the data, which also means manage your time and resources well. And I strongly advise to use the virtual machines in that were described before. We did, because we had to deal with 30 gigabyte of data, and you don't want to train a model, a machine learning model with that kind of data on your local machine, because that's not going to work, or it's going to work really slowly. On the other hand, the tech is only one component of the hackathon, and on the other hand, you have the people. So build the right team and make sure that you match one another. So you might have a back end, a front end, and a communication person, but people that are sort of match one another skills. You stick to the problem, because you will want to say, oh, what can we do? What can we add? Build a minimum version of what you want to build, because you don't have much time. Leverage the mentorship and resources, manage your time, and prepare for pitching, because pitching is important. It's not the last 5 minutes thing. It's like, oh yeah, we do have the pitching, we need to prepare the presentation. Take some time for that, because it's important as well, because I think that your idea needs to be communicated well as well. It doesn't have to be only brilliant, but you also have to make people understand what they're trying to do. And yeah, so if one thing, there's 2 QR codes. One is for the dashboard, where you've seen the screenshots before, where you can interact and see what's in it. And the second one is our website, if you want to get in touch with us, or if you have more questions or follow-up questions. And that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. We actually have already a couple questions in the chat. So the first one, can anybody in the chat, why is it costly to get this data?
No, that's actually all for free. So all the phishing data, the marine protected areas are all for free. And there's a lot of websites for different kind of data that are completely free. So for example, if you're interested in species, there's the OBIS, which is the UN dataset for species distribution. There's the UCN, which are all free. So we didn't pay for anything of this data. And of course, there's also the WEkEO resources, the Copernicus service, which has a lot of data, and all of them are free. Kind of constrained that they are large data. So it might be costly to process them, because you need the computational resources, but the data themselves are free.
Thank you. Next question, is machine learning model used for the monthly forecasts?
Yes, so we used a variation of the convolutional neural network, which takes as an input the time series of environmental variables, which we've seen before, that goes from the nitrate, the phosphate, pH, the chlorophyll, and it basically output a time series for every geographic coordinate, as long as we want and as long as it's feasible. So it will predict at this point 12 points, which is the 12 months. I would suggest, if you're using machine learning for forecast, give it an horizon that makes sense with the amount of data that you have in the past. So don't try to predict 10 years if you have 5 years or 10 years in the past, because machine learning needs to learn. So it cannot put a forecast, but make it match with what kind of data you are pre-processing. So usually choose an interval that is much smaller than the data that are inputted, because otherwise it will lose precision.
Thank you. Next question, but this must be more general. External data sets, not only the WEkEO, are allowed during the hackathon, and Marine can correct me if true. One of the evaluation criteria for this hack is actually if you are using the WEkEO data sets. That doesn't stop you from using external ones, but you need to use the WEkEO data sets still. So the next question, can you please show again the prototype you presented at the end of the hackathon, and tell us more about these functionalities at that time?
Yes. So at that time, it was, again, a very rough version of the dashboard that you've seen. Because, again, MVP, do the minimum. So at the very beginning, which I will pull it out. So what we basically did was a slider, which will pull out for a specific area the data in the past of the variables that you would have selected on the left. So we had different data set about pH, the salinity, and etc., which would be composed of the satellite data and our forecast at the end. I think at that time, the forecast was 6 months and not 1 year, if I remember correctly. And then in this case, we use as a pilot the Mediterranean Sea. So this is Alba Island and Sardinia, the north point of Sardinia. And if also we had the option, if you would have clicked at the bottom to select an ecosystem to overlap on the environmental conditions. So at that time, we had the seagrass because it's an endangered ecosystem in the Mediterranean because of climate change, because of fisheries, and a whole lot of different problems. And then if you would have clicked on one square, basically on the map, it would have pulled out a graph of the temperature in that geographic coordinates across time. And again, in this case, we had 3 layers, 1 meters, 5 meters, and 10 meters depth. So basically, we had everything about the forecast, and the model is still the same. We haven't touched it because it worked. We just have different models for different areas. So we train each model with the data of the specific area, but the architecture is the same. So basically, we revised the graphics a little bit, and we added the gauges and the tables, but the mapping is basically the same. So the data are the same in the background, sort of.
Thank you. Any other questions from our attendees today and future participants? No. No. So I will thank you, Alessandro, for your time and for your insights, and good luck for your project. And thank you so much for inspiring and give us a real life example of these applications.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So now we're going to jump to the last part of this webinar. That's going to be a bit about the ideation and project development. I will introduce myself once again. I'm Francisca from UltraHack, and UltraHack will be basically in charge of organizing the hackathon and giving you support throughout this journey. Today, our focus is about turning your ideas into actionable concepts. We will use 2 approaches that I will recommend, but you can use any other approach that you are familiar with. A little introduction about ideation. As it says here, the ideation is the generation of new ideas and concepts to solve specific problems that your customers or end users are facing. Before we jump into the ideation exercises, there is some rules that I want to make clear. This part is about quantity, not quality yet. So no criticism, welcome all the ideas, combine and improve the ideas that are currently being used, challenge assumptions, focus on the topic of the WEkEO Hackathon, and be respectful and have one conversation at a time. Try to be visual. And when we say to be visual, you don't need to create a super fancy slide. It can be something like notes or sticky notes, so like, but just try to put your ideas outside of yourself. So in this ideation process, we will refrain to use yes, but instead use yes, and. Now about the ideation exercises. The goal of this session is turn your chaos into clarity. And we have one approach that we use, and it's pretty common in hackathons, the problem first approach, where you start by identifying the problems, for example, in the climate space, and try to figure out what issues are closest to you or you have the more knowledge into the problem. And the next one that we will have, it's going to be the rapid ideation exercises that can be a follow-up of this problem first approach, where you have 2 to 3 ideas that each team member gives. So you basically just want to keep the creativity flowing. And in this part is only about the volume. You want to come up with as many solutions or problems, and at this point it's not still about filtering. So we can have a timer like 5 minutes that each person writes down their ideas or questions, and then you have a follow-up discussion where you try to filter them. But let's start from the problem first approach. We have, for example, problem 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you are trying to connect all the dots. And here we have a tool that using the how might we questions to ideate the right problems. So imagine that you have the 6 problems as we mentioned before. With these how might we questions, you can start writing some solutions or some possible solutions to solve this problem. How might we solve sanitation problems in Finland, or how might we use the data to analyze, for example, dangerous species or species in danger, or any sort of questions that you might have. And into this how might we exercises is basically just coming up with many ideas, is understanding how much potential an idea has, and also focusing essentially on the problems that you want to solve in this hack. These how might we questions might be also combined with the ideation brainstorming, where you have the sticky note and basically you write them everything that you have on your mind, and without any judgment. After you go through these how might we questions and the sticky note and putting everything out, it's time to discuss your ideas. It's time to share your ideas and try to be more vocal about what you have written, and basically understand with your group what sort of things you could come up with. And after your discussion is done and you presented your ideas, your amazing ideas, it's time to sort your ideas into buckets. And what I mean with this, you can either choose to group your ideas into the same, for example, topics. So if a lot of you came with climate issues that are in a certain topic, you can combine them. Or you can also do this brainstorm area where all the ideas are, and then you can pick your favorite ideas after your discussion that you feel like you are focusing in. So basically, you start with a lot of ideas with a big view, and at this point of the process of your brainstorming process, you are then narrowing it down to your favorite ideas, or to the ideas that you feel that have more potential or are closest to you. If you're completely lost, no worries, we got you. We have some focus areas and examples, and you can use them as a guide or inspiration, or to come up with your own idea. In the WEkEO Hackathon website where you apply, you will find this part where you have these examples that you can read them through. You can, of course, pick them as base of your ideation process as well, so you are not completely lost. We have sustainability strategies, for example, and here we have solution examples for different topics, for the heat wave forecast and their socioeconomic impacts, or for renewable energy transaction. Then we also have biodiversity and environmental protection. I'm not going to go into detail throughout every solution example that we have provided to you, because you can see that on your own and with your team, and it's available for everyone on the UltraHack website in the WEkEO Hackathon. So you will get these examples on your inbox after this webinar, and you can also go look for them on your own. But the point is, you have many examples that you can start from if you feel completely lost and if you feel that you don't know where to start. Before you start a hackathon, and I think you already got some sort of idea that the time that you have is not a lot, so you should focus on something. And one great way to do a quick evaluation of your ideas, or the ideas that are feasible to do throughout the hackathon, are using this framework. We have here this low effort and high effort, and high impact and low impact. And the areas that fit into the great and good are things that you could focus within this hackathon. For example, if you have an idea that provides a high impact and low effort, it's something that you can execute right away and will be a great starting point. And then if you have something that is high effort, it's good. You can ask yourself, how can you reach to the same impact with less effort? Or then it can be part of your milestone, because as we have seen in this webinar, not all the ideas stop when the hackathon stops. You can continue with your ideas further, and WEkEO is here also to provide you help throughout that process. So it's something that you might look forward to do after the hackathon with the support of the partners and the mentoring. And last but not least, because I want you to have as many resources as needed to help you throughout the ideation process and before your hackathon submission, you can have also this like map where you try to identify the value of your idea at the moment, what makes it different, how does it work in practice, and what makes this idea viable to execute. The next steps are basically prototyping and submitting your ideas. At this stage, you don't need to prototype anything, but at least you can already start submitting your ideas. And you can, of course, before the hackathon, we encourage you that you do as much ideation and brainstorming and filtering your ideas as possible. So when you start the hackathon, you are ready to start the mentoring and working on your ideas. You can indeed start your hackathon journey planning. For example, now we have these ideas and we want maybe help of mentoring to sort out what could be the best ways to execute them. But it's a great time to start submitting them on the WEkEO Hackathon page and get your submission approved as soon as possible. And because you can't move on into this hackathon alone, or I mean, you can, but there's a lot of work to do, we also have the matchmaking happening right now. And for this, we have some tips or extra tips because we have already amazing insights. What is a dream team? But we have here tips on how to find your dream team. You can go to the WEkEO's Ultra Hack webpage and register for the event. That is now available introductions and submissions as well that you can go through. You can already start contacting interesting individuals and teams, and you can join a team and submit your application by latest 1st of December. The ingredients of a winning team are something like a team formed from 3 to 5 people, and you should of course be interested in this challenge. You have a common solution idea, or at least a common ground to start ideating on your solution. You have complementary skill sets, as Alessandra has said. You have people that know a bit of their own areas and can complement each other, and you also bring a diversity to your team and your ideas. To help you with that, besides the website, I can see that a couple of you here are already in our Slack. You can join your Slack, our Slack channel, where you can start introducing yourself and finding new team members, and of course, ask questions about the event. In our Slack, we also provide you with all the resources and the presentations and everything. So if you want to have a quick look at our Slack, please, you can scan the QR code or then join throughout this link. We will also send this to your email box, so no worries about it. But it's a great way to get started and also make your journey into this WEkEO Hackathon easier. Last but not least, from my side, we will have a matchmaking workshop session where participants can join and pitch your ideas and explore potential collaborations and partnerships with other participants. And that will happen on 28th of November at 2 Central European time. So feel free to join if you don't have a team, or if you already have a team but you are looking for complementary skills. We will be happy to have you there. Well, now let's open the stage for questions regarding the hackathon, the matchmaking process, or anything that you might be unsure about. I can see here a question from Frederica. I have a question about participation of team members. The people who like to join with me are working, cannot join the hackathon event during working hours on Friday, but they can join for the rest of the weekend. Is that allowed? Of course, it's allowed. And even throughout the hackathon, we don't want to force you that you need to be like all the 48 hours like glued to your screen. So we have mandatory times that we will have a quick checkup with you, but you are free to work within the hours that fit best you and your team. Is it possible to create a team just for 2 members? We recommend that the teams have 3 to 5 members, but of course, if you have 2 members right now, it's possible. We recommend that you go through the matchmaking workshops and you join our Slack, so then you could find a complementary skill and a team member that could help you throughout the process. But of course, you are welcome to join, regardless of the team size. Any other questions? No, no more questions. And as you know, the event is online, so you can join wherever you are in the world. Just make sure to sync your schedule to the Central European time so you don't miss anything. But I'm really, really happy to see all of you here. If you have any further questions, you can find more information at UltraHack's WEkEO page or on Slack, as I mentioned many, many times. You can also email Jana or me. We will be answering you within 1 business day. Thank you, everyone. And I wish you good luck and looking forward for you to create a positive impact in this WEkEO Hackathon. I will be here for a couple more minutes if you want to ask me questions without the spotlight. So no worries about that. And I see that we have some thank you. So I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day or rest of the day. And I hope to see your submissions coming in really soon. Bye.